Proficient.
Proficient, and whatever proficient means, and I suspect that they've lowered the bar quite a bit for what proficiency actually means.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'm assuming they would have to do that, or else they would be totally shut down or something.
Right.
I mean, because that's bad.
So here's my issue with that as a Bible-believing pastor. Christians can't read the Bible.
Yeah, that's a thing. Where 100 and something years ago, this was fifth grade. This was fifth grade proficiency right here.
I've got adults tell me they can't understand it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they're lying to me. I believe they can't understand it.
Right. I mean, look how we speak with LOL and what do you call it? Acronyms, or what do you call it?
I call it text language.
Text language. That's how we speak primarily, because we're primarily always on this.
Right, and we've got to be fast. Face to face. We only have so much time, so we got to say, not laughing out loud, but LOL. I mean, I get it. I use LOL.
Me too. I use it. But anyway, it's an issue.
I'm concerned. 18%.
That's bad.
That tells me that if I were to put a Bible in front of 100% of the people in this room, only 18% would really be able to understand it. That's frightening. When I'm a pastor trying to lead a flock, and whereas we're not, we're Bible Believers Church. We're Bible-based church. Your life, to me, is going to be wrapped up in what you understand and know about the Scriptures.
Right.
So if you can't read it.
Right. And also, wow, that makes more sense now, just think about it now. I mean, think about it from, okay, let's talk about the NIV. 1970-something, mid-70s-ish came out, I believe.
I don't remember.
And then
I want to say 60s.
And I know there was a second edition in the early 80s. But anyway, so here comes the dumbing down of the Bible throughout the years. And what's the number one seller? The dumbing down versions.
Sure.
Because this is too hard to understand. Well, why? Because people aren't understanding. So it as a whole, I guess. I mean, not just Buffalo Public Schools, but that's bad. 18%. That's bad. Grade 5, we read, 5th grade, we read The Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens, I remember that. So there's some tougher English language in there, right?
Well, certainly.
Charles Dickens.
Yeah, and phraseology that wouldn't be used today. Right. That always makes it difficult. And I will agree to that, even when it comes to Scripture, especially seeing that we're King James only, is that it's a language that's just not common today.
Right.
It's true. That's different. Already difficult. So if you don't understand, articles and pronouns, and verbs and how a sentence needs to be structured, you're really, really going to struggle.
Yeah, and one thing I try to do, and Caleb might remember this, but in junior church when I started, I felt the need to teach grammar. And break down verses and what are the these and the thous and all that, because even today in class, I have a verse up there and I go, okay, let's break down this verse. What's the which here? And I went to Revelation 1:4, which is, which was, and which is to come. The which is Jesus Christ, that's the subject.
Let's be clear, WHICH.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, brother. That's why he's the head pastor.
Yeah.
But, it's that article that explains that. But you have to explain this to these kids because...
Well, they need it.
They need to know that.
Yeah, but you know what? I've got to explain that to the adults, too.
Yeah.
And that's not...
It's not common.
Right. It's just... The understanding of the English language is not common. In fact, when I went to school to become a pastor, I had to take an English class. I don't know if you know that.
I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I looked forward to it. And it was the best, I would say, it was one of the best classes I had to take. Even above...
Did it spark maybe more of an interest in, etymology and all of that as far as...
No, I think the etymology thing was already there, but making sure that I understood sentence structure, and that helps in just understanding Scripture.
Amen. Right.
Knowing why an article's there and why an article,
or why this verse isn't, I know it's verse 20, then verse 21, but this verse isn't ended because there's a semicolon, not a period.
Right.
So, and that's huge.
And Paul was a rambler.
Yeah, very seldom
He'd
had
go on
periods.
for 10 verses without
Sure.
a period.
Right. And you
So
got to teach that whole
Right, with side thoughts and parenthetical thoughts.
literal parentheses, right? Yeah.
Where you can't keep the attention span of somebody to say a 7-word sentence.
Right.
You're now talking about
Paragraph.
a 300-word sentence.
Right. Right.
With multiple side thoughts.
That's God's word.
It's complex.
And it's complex, right?
It's complex. So if I already don't have a grasp of the English language, I'm in trouble.
Right.
I'm in trouble.
I mean, even the way I grew up, it's funny, I didn't have a love for reading or grammar or whatever until I got older. But even the way I speak, using often or the word like when I shouldn't, I try to correct myself because that's not proper. And I know it, but that's how I grew up. Was I reading? Was I really studying as much as I should have been? Mm-hmm. No. But it's also culture.
Proper English doesn't sound correct. We were talking about that. We did a Bible study with the kids, and Caleb was there as well. And I was talking to them about when I'm preparing a lesson or a sermon, I will actually reread, and then when I see that in a sentence I ended with a preposition,
okay,
because you're not supposed to end the preposition to, from, around, about.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So, for example, and I use this as an example, we would say when we don't understand something, what are you talking about? But that's not proper English. It should be, about what are you speaking?
Right.
But that sounds weird.
Right.
It doesn't
People
sound normal.
Look at you like
oh, okay.
okay, professor.
Right, exactly. And I get called that a lot.
Yeah.
Even Pete Wigdor jokes every time I come over, Dr. Koenig. Eventually, Pete, you're going to have to get my name is actually Koenig, but that's all right. We're going to let that go. But it's always
20
Doctor.
years. Well, I have an aunt, now that we're on the subject, and we'll move on, but she teaches English to Bulgarian people that moved to this country. She's Bulgarian herself. And she'll be teaching, she'll have her whiteboard and breaking down sentences, but when she's just having conversation with them, she'll try to speak in English, or she will speak in English. They correct her. Because if they're just talking about, the score of the Bills game or just casually speaking, they're like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean by... She's like, oh, wait.
Casual
I just did
speak.
That.
Yeah.
Right, so
I'll actually go through and I'll find, when I find that I put the preposition at the end of the sentence, I'll go, that's incorrect. And then, so if you've noticed that, I'll speak in a manner in which is the not Bible? Typically spoken.
Right, but that's how the Bible speaks, I should say, right?
I'd have to look to see whether or not the prepositions are at the end of the sentences. And the Bible doesn't always follow all of the rules of grammar today, but you got to remember that was the beginning of the English language.
Right.
So the rules of grammar in English hadn't really been established. And so it would depend upon not the translator, if you will.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
Because in Greek in particular, because you're translating from Koine Greek in the New Testament over to English, the words are like a word jumble. I don't know if you've, for example...
There's like no spaces and stuff.
Well, there's no spaces and there's no punctuation marks.
Right, wow.
And they could be either all lowercase letters or all uppercase letters, depending on the manuscript. And you could say, well, this one actually follows along, but in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The words that I just said in the order in which they were said in Greek may be jumbled. And so the translator would not only have to understand the word, which wasn't separated. So again, imagine in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. No punctuation, and every word just flowed with no spaces.
Yeah, that's
how Koine Greek was written. And then they would have to determine, okay, well, here are the words, and then the words on top of that weren't in that order. It was a word jumble. So they would have to figure out, well, how do we order the words in the sentence?
Wow.
So that it will make sense and that the English speaking people will get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was,
wow.
so
It's intense.
It's an amazing book.
So
a lot
learning
went into it. So learning English is huge.
Is huge, and we're failing. I would say, to be fair, like we just said, that's an American thing. That's a culture thing. That's a 2021 problem, or has been for a long time. And just to finish these stats up, grade 8 science, or science so falsely called, probably 27%.
Well, and this is why I find this funny, because it was the highest grade.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting.
Now, is that because it's more interesting to people? I mean, wouldn't you rather learn about earth science than the English language?
Yeah, especially when I was in school.
Sure.
Yeah. Now it's
history.
opposite.
Do you want to learn European history,
Yeah,
or do you want to learn about the koala bear?
Yeah. Right. I know. That is interesting.
So science again. Let's make this point too. Biology.
Two.
It's the study of the two genders. Mm-hmm. It's the study of reproduction, which is found in a bigender.
Yeah.
It's not 4, 5, 10, 20, 100,
or
30.
whatever. Yeah, 2,
It's
not
just
32.
interesting, but that would be real science, and biology would actually dictate that it's bi. It's right in the word.
Right.
You wonder, when are they going to change the word? Because it doesn't meet the narrative.
Right.
There's got to be some woke person out there thinking right now, it needs to not be biology. It's not bi.
Just ology. Yeah, or whatever.
Well, then that's just the study.
Yeah. Who knows? The study of, you guys are just dumb. Stop. 80% of Buffalo City school students fail to reach proficiency in reading and writing.
Yeah.
80%, that's huge.
That's a problem, reading and writing the Bible, articulating, communicating.
Yeah. How about on your job?
And they don't have to learn how to handwrite anymore either. It's all printing.
It's all printing. Yeah, right. Like cursive writing.
I suspect that probably won't matter as things continue to go to the digital age.
Right.
It
Typing
won't matter.
is important.
But what happens when the power grid goes out and you can't write?
Right.
And you can't read what's been handwritten?
Unbelievable. I mean, it's just the downward spiral of the culture.
One of the big things about, and we'll eventually get to this homeschooling, right? But one of the big things that Wendy implemented with the kids, I mean, she's a big library person.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
So she goes to the library, and I know things are different under the pandemic, but let's assume the pandemic wasn't here. She'd go to the library. At least once a month, and there's 2 libraries. She'd go to a public library, and then she'd go to a Christian library. And I think she has clocked the average year of the books that our children have read at somewhere between 500 and 700 a year.
That's awesome. That's great.
And our kids can read.
Yeah, that's good.
That's not that they don't stumble. I mean, we all stumble. I stumble over words.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're well spoken and they're well read. And to me, that's important.
Oh, it's huge.
I want to know that they're going to be able to read the Bible when I'm dead and buried. Right. If I go the way of the grave, that they're not going to need Dad to understand the Bible, that they're going to be able to articulate and break down the sentences of the Bible.
And honestly, a good testimony, and I would say to the parents of our church at least, these kids read the Bible well. They could read the Boxcar Children and whatever. They could read that. My son reads that stuff, but they read the Bible and ask good questions. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome. But so political agendas are being pushed in the schools where they're failing at just reading, writing, and arithmetic. Mm-hmm. The focus is off. So I think Christians have been enlightened or in the know of public schools for a very long time, and we don't like public schools for many reasons. Okay, this may be just being one of them, but that's why we choose to homeschool. And I guess with that said is that the interesting thing, because of the cold pandemic, if I could say that.
I don't know.
Who cares?
It's always the cold.
Secularly speaking, lots of families are interested in homeschooling, and that number has grown.
Yeah.
And I actually have a stat here. Homeschooling has grown up to 8% in the last few years. Some parts of our country, school districts up to 25%.
Now,
of the people living in that city or town or that district.
That stats doesn't have 2020 on it.
No, this was, I went with, it doesn't. Well, that's what I mean, for years.
So without the pandemic.
Yeah, even with,
because I would imagine the numbers are through the roof right now.
Yes.
But I would imagine they'll dip back once schools begin to open up again.
True, but I've also heard just from, honestly, just speaking to coworkers or whatnot, or people you work with, so people are forced to homeschool now, basically because schools are shut down, okay?
Right.
Schools are opening up, Buffalo schools are not, and that's a whole nother ball of wax because teachers don't want to go back to schools because they're unsafe. And
that's fine. I think that should be their choice, but then they shouldn't be paid.
Right. There should be someone to. If I choose not to go to work,
I don't get paid.
I will be replaced. Yeah. So
with someone who is willing to go.
Exactly. So that's on that the ball's in your court, Buffalo City Schools on that one.
Absolutely.
So just wake up. All right. But people are just generally sick of the way public schools are being run and what they're doing with their kids. And homeschooling has gained popularity.
Right.
We have some sort of co-op here that's obviously Bible-based. There are secular-based co-ops, and there's a lot of them actually. So there's a crowd of people out there that are done with the way that the schools are being run, and also a lot of that has to do with getting injections. That have been forced upon in the schools. People are like, hey, hands off. A lot of naturalist people, maybe not saved people.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. We do have some naturalist people that are saved, of course, but to whatever you want to do with that.
Right.
But listen, you can't tell me that I have to do this to my child, so we're not going to go to school there.
Yep.
So why do we homeschool?
Other people, I think, are actually, they're falling in love with it.
Sure. You're with your kids all the time.
This is great. Yeah. I mean, assuming that you like your kids, but why don't some people? That's a different issue. But I think for some people, they didn't realize how much of a blessing it would actually be to be such a part of your children's life, their lives, and the upbringing, and the fact that you can control their education. I think that's huge for us. I mean, my kids love science. Well, Gabe in particular. But I don't want him to love that which is falsely taught about science.
Right. You teach him science through the Bible, through Christian authors as well. I guess I'll say this, the big thing, and I don't know how you felt about this, maybe before you even had children, but a big thing you'll hear out there in the world is, wow, homeschooling, that's interesting, but what do you think about the social aspect of it? That's number one, okay? It's not, they're not gonna know how to read or whatever. It's, well, wait a minute, Johnny can't play basketball or do this or that. Let me say this from experience. My children are homeschooled. We are so busy with social activities. We're too busy. I mean, we have co-ops and sports and friends that they hang out with and making arrangements for those things.
Well, you've got a very large extended Italian family as well.
Well, yeah, so but that's actually, believe it or not, I mean, when you're talking, let's say even just academic or sports, whatever, that's just people here at the church.
Yeah. Well, I was just joking about this. Sort of.
Yeah. I do have a huge family.
No, but
we're too busy for that.
That has always been, in my experience, the excuse that is thrown.
Number one.
Oh, you homeschool. Aren't you worried about the social aspect? It's okay. Here we go.
Right.
Here we go. Okay. Well, I was raised in a public school.
Me too, by the way. Yeah.
Now, I can't speak for you. I can speak for myself. I was an extremely introverted child.
Yeah, I was not.
It didn't matter that I was public schooled. Right. I was the nervous kid, at least through grammar school, and certainly into middle school. I was the kid that kept his mouth shut, was quiet, was afraid to open my mouth, believe it or not, right?
Yeah, I'm like, is this the same person? But go ahead.
Yeah. I remember even just entering college secularly, and I took an English class, which I loved the English class, but the final assignment was a public speaking. And for most people, that is like death.
Yeah.
They have to get up and say something or sing something, God forbid, even worse, right, to sing.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
I'm so used to it now, but at the time I wasn't.
Sure.
And I can honestly say that the whole semester I was sweating bullets on that thing. Mm-hmm. And got down to that final assignment. I had to, I made sure that my content was animated. And I just figured I'm just going to go for broke, and I'm going to try to entertain them while I'm speaking.
Because you have nothing to lose at that point. No.
I'm already uncomfortable,
Right.
is what I thought. So if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. So I just went for broke, and I learned at that point, because I mean, people were engaged. You could just tell.
Yeah.
Even then, people were watching like.
Yeah,
whereas, other people got up there and spoke, and they're staring at their paper like this,
right.
and people are like, when's lunch,
Hurry up.
But I had their attention, and I even purposed to use dynamic in speech, and I'm not going to give you the subject matter, but I actually got them very quiet, and I started whispering, and everyone, you can see when you bring your voice down low, people they do this, they lean in, because as long as you were engaging first.
Right.
And then I slammed my hand down and got everyone in the entire room to jump, including the teacher. And there was a point to it. Like I said, I won't go into the details of the speech, but the point was to illustrate dynamics of speech.
Sure. Right.
And in other media. And so I remember that just got their attention. And I eventually got good at speaking. Well, I think I can speak well.
No, absolutely, yeah.
And
it's
certainly it's not right. And I'm not like, I couldn't do it. I can't, for the sake of this being a Bible podcast, I can tell you what I had to do when I was in a band years ago in order to be able to sing in front of people.
Right, I think they get it.
So it was just, I
Right.
just couldn't. I was frozen in front of people. And so I think, that public speaking is one of the biggest issues, and that goes into the social thing. But the point being is that I was very socially awkward.
Right. Even being in public
school. And I think that shy people are just shy people.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're...
And it's something they have to overcome.
Sure. Yep.
And that could be public, that could be homeschool.
Right.
Every child is different. Every spirit within that child is different. And you as a parent have to learn the differences of your child so as to get them ready for the world. And the good thing about that is that in a public school, you got 30, 40 kids in a classroom. That teacher can't possibly give the attention to that student that student may require.
Right. You're absolutely right. I mean, two of my two older sons homeschooled. And the oldest one's a little shyer than the middle one, Jack. He's a ham. And he, will do songs, and he's just happy to get on that microphone, something I need to work on. Right? But the older one, he's a little more reserved and, I want to sing, and he loves singing for the Lord and all that, but he's a little nervous about it.
So a little more Janet, and Jack's a little more you? Is that in the personality?
I've been a ham. But public speaking...
I like to eat ham.
Yeah. I've always been nervous about that, though. And not so comfortable with it all the time. But going back to the social aspect, for homeschooling, I mean, your kids could be involved with anything, if not more than what public schools offer. Right. And
well, just being in our church.
It's huge.
They're around kids that, I mean, the community of our church, and it's a small church, but the group of kids, 20, 30 kids, they're all engaging.
Yeah.
You tell me you engaged intimately with 30 people at school? Probably not.
No, right. That's
you probably had a handful of real close friends, a circle.
Right.
But I would say that the circle at our church in particular it's very inclusive.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's cliques. There may be. You get along with those you get along with. It is what it is. But by and large, there's 30 kids all spending time with each other and engaging each other on some level.
Yeah, it's great.
And that's
so the social thing, to me, that's just an excuse or people get weirded out.
Both of my children, you know what they do? They do the unspeakable thing. We went for a walk the other day.
Oh, no.
And even here I am, a pastor and someone who likes to share the gospel. And we're walking, and I'm thinking, double time, get those legs up, and I'm thinking that stuff. And there was somebody walking, and both Gabriel and Lucas go, "Hi, how are you?" And I just stopped and looked up, because I didn't even realize there was a person there. But they engaged him. How many people, this is a thing, where two strangers walk by and you don't even want to look at each other.
It's common, yeah, right.
And we're talking adults.
Yeah, right.
It's just uncomfortable. I don't know who you are, so it's kind of like maybe I'll look up and go, Because this isn't the South, this is Buffalo.
Yeah, right.
And we don't really engage. Like, it's weird to wave at somebody. People are like, why are you looking at me? Why are you waving at me?
Yeah, you're right. People are friendlier down south generally.
That's what I hear.
Okay. Yeah.
Point being is that my kids, who are homeschooled, are very outgoing. Almost to a flaw where they'll be in a public place like a grocery store or what have you and open up a conversation with a stranger.
Yeah, right.
But they don't feel uncomfortable doing that, even though they're homeschooled.
Yeah, right. So it comes down to, the reason we homeschool, because we're Christians and we believe they could be corrupted big time by stuff like this, what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, a good testimony, there's a couple families in our church that didn't homeschool as of recently, mm-hmm. and worried about, hey, financially, could we do this?
Sure.
Because both, mother and father both work. Or this and that, or could we afford to take them out of this schooling and then actually have to pay for some curriculum and all of that?
Well, I got a side note for that, because I think it's wrong to collect school taxes on a family that does not put their children in school.
Agreed 100%. And then give that family beef about you can't go on their playgrounds during school hours. Well, wait a minute.
Well, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Or at least in the town I live in.
Fine, then I won't use your play set, but give me my money back.
Give me my money back. Thousands of dollars a year. Yeah, right. But, people worry about that or whatever. We've had two families in this church that recently started homeschooling, and they've been blessed. Mm-hmm. And you know why? Because the money doesn't matter. You're home with your kids, you're teaching them. That's something that a big fat wallet can't do, because I see it out there. I go to work and these women come, they drop off their kids to daycare for 12 hours a day. How's their relationship with their kids?
Huffing and puffing the whole while. Right. Still having to answer to somebody else. The freedom my wife gets.
Sure.
She sets up her own schedule.
Yes. Hey, we're going to do this fellowship on that day at 2:00. Well, we usually have school, but I could change that.
Sure. We got school at 6:00 tonight.
Sure.
Because we're going to go, hey, we've decided we're going to go get an ice cream.
Yeah, sure.
We can do that.
You could do that. And that's a blessing. And I'll tell you, the Lord will bless you. If your heart's in the right place about it, the Lord will bless you. Mm-hmm. Just that blessing of being home with your kids, that's great.
Right. So, beyond the aspect of I get to control my child's education.
Right.
Is that I'm with my child.
Yeah. Yeah.
My kids, think about this, and I know you don't have the same blessing. Hopefully you do one day. But both my kids, they see mom and dad at home all the time.
Right. That's right.
We're both in the home because I work from home as a pastor. And I go off to the office. They know daddy goes off and has appointments and what have you.
Absolutely.
But by and large, he's in the office. He's working downstairs. And mom's home. Yeah. We are a tight-knit family.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's such a blessing, and to be able to spend that time. And, my wife will take the kids on a field trip, and hey, it's Monday. Oh, I just saw this. Let's do this Wednesday. This is great. And it's educational. It's about maple syrup or whatever. And then they bring God into the equation because they're like, wow, look at this. And they do a project about, look at the maple tree, how it resembles it.
Right.
It's a blessing. And I will say this too, and we could end with this or shortly. At first, I was a little hesitant about homeschooling because homeschooling mothers might not like this. I like regiment. I like you at the breakfast table at 7:30. I like you open up your books at 8:30. I had to go to school. I had to go to a bus stop.
There's something to be learned about a regiment is good, and that is, I will admit, that is one area, and Wendy and I have talked about this, where our kids are going to have a hard time.
Sure. Hey, your boss wants you to work at 4:00.
You got to be there.
So you should be there like 3:50. That's just me. That's how I
agree.
like to raise my kids. So me and my wife, maybe a little at first about, listen, breakfast this time, because you're going to need that. So that's my only thing. But
Yeah.
before homeschooling, we looked at other schools, private Christian schools. And I have to say this because this actually spoke to me in volumes. The one local Christian school we went to, the associate pastor was the principal. And he said to me, I'm sitting at his table, and he said to me, he goes, I recommend homeschooling number 1. That's what he said to me. A guy trying to sell me to go to their school, okay? An honest Christian.
How about that?
Yeah, he goes, I recommend homeschooling number 1. He goes, if you can't, because some families may can't or they think they can't.
Right.
I'll say that.
Right.
He goes, well, then maybe this is the place for you. Right there. I'm like, okay, Lord, you kind of showed it to me. I go, well, we could homeschool. And it was a blessing from this associate pastor who was the principal. So, yeah, there are options out there. Is a private Christian school better than the public school? Sure, it depends on how you're looking at that. I don't know.
Right. Well, both parents may work out of necessity.
Absolutely.
I think an honest assessment might reveal that you can tighten things up.
Yeah.
And that you don't need as much as you think you need, and that spending time with your kids is going to be priceless anyhow,
Right.
as opposed to just collecting stuff
Right.
and dying with stuff that you can't bring with you.
Amen. But to have the opportunity to instill the Bible and this intimate relation with your kids, and it's priceless. So I would say homeschool if you can, and if you think you can't, to pray about it, because maybe there are things in your life that maybe you could do without, that you don't need that extra paycheck for.
Right. Well, thanks for watching another episode of the Bible Believers Podcast. We hope to see you again soon.